deep in the dark folds of intergalactic space, far beyond the glow of stars, where temperatures dropped to near absolute zero, NASA's instruments caught something. Not a star, not a planet, not even a black hole, but something stranger. Hidden inside a cold, featureless void where no light should ever shine, a structure appeared, geometrically perfect, repeating, and possibly artificial. What was once thought to be just empty space now whispers a question few dare ask. What if we're not alone, not in the stars, but in the darkness between them? Subscribe if you believe space still holds secrets too strange for fiction. Join us on a journey through the void and into a mystery that could redefine our place. In the cosmos, there are places in the universe so empty, so staggeringly vast, they defy the very concept of existence. No stars, no light, no matter, just an abyss, silent, eternal, unyielding. The boat's void is one of them, a region so large it could swallow 2,000 galaxies and still echo with silence. For decades, astronomers thought of it as a cosmic accident, a vacuum carved by chance. But in early 2024, something changed. NASA's James Webb Space Telescope was conducting a routine infrared sweep across the deep sky. Its target, background radiation signatures just beyond the edge of known galactic clusters. The goal was simple: to refine our understanding of early cosmic microwave background patterns. But what it found was not background noise. It was a disturbance, a symmetrical, pulsating structure embedded within nothingness. At first, the anomaly looked like a calibration error, a mirrored spike repeating at fixed intervals. Dr. Lena Armitage, a systems analyst at Caltech, initially dismissed it, but something about its rhythm was too clean, too perfect. The signal didn't fade like interference. It held steady, as if echoing from something fixed and deliberate. Armitage reran the data using different filters, then again and again. Same result, a faint geometrically patterned distortion in the middle of the coldest known place in the observable universe. It wasn't just a fluctuation in radiation, it was spatial. Whatever this was, it was bending the very fabric of space. Around it, the distortions followed a repeating shape, concentric rings embedded in a lattice of mathematical precision. The deeper Armitage and her team zoomed into the data, the clearer the pattern became. Like a fingerprint, left behind by something vast and unnatural, word spread quickly across astrophysics communities. The boat's void, once considered the universe's most uneventful region, was now under scrutiny from every corner of the scientific world. Teams from MIT, ESA, and even private research groups joined in, each reprocessing the data with increasing urgency. And all found the same result: a regular, structured anomaly embedded in the void. But what did it mean? Some proposed it was a gravitational echo from a long-collapsed black hole, perhaps. The dying remnants of a hypermassive star that existed before the known galaxies ever formed. Others saw something more chilling: the signature of a megastructure. Not a planet, not a star, but an artificial object of impossible size and design, suspended in a place where nature should have left nothing at all. What disturbed scientists most was not just the presence of the anomaly, but where it was found. The boat's void isn't just empty, it's too empty. Statistically, it shouldn't exist in that form. Cosmic inflation and gravity should have seeded at least some galactic matter here over the eon. Yet this part of the sky remained clean, untouched, as if intentionally cleared. Could this have been a coincidence? A natural pocket of low density that just happened to develop this way? Or was this emptiness engineered? And here's where the questions grew darker. If something had carved out a silence this large, a place hundreds of millions of light years wide, what could wield such power? And more importantly, why? The first fringe theories began to emerge in late March. Speculative, yes, but compelling. One paper anonymously circulated through closed research forums suggested the void wasn't empty at all. It was masked, cloaked by a technology advanced enough to scatter light and radiation in precisely calculated intervals, a cosmic blind spot. But the JWST's ultrafine sensors had finally seen through it, like lifting a veil and glimpsing an eye staring. Back Dr. Armitage, typically grounded in data and logic, published a rare personal reflection on her findings in a peer-reviewed letter. What unnerves me most is not the anomaly itself, but the silence that surrounds it. It's not just empty space. It's a place that feels withheld, like a room in a house that's always locked, and you're not meant to ask why. It wasn't long before agencies like SETI, DARPA, and even international security agencies began quietly monitoring the discovery, not because it posed an imminent threat, but because no one could agree on what it actually was. An ancient relic, a failed experiment, or something still active. By April, independent satellite arrays had begun picking up low-frequency gravitational patterns aligning with the anomaly's location. Faint, rhythmic pulses, like ripples in a dark ocean, stretching across space-time itself. And they were getting stronger. What could be out there in the middle of all that nothing? A remnant from a forgotten age of the cosmos, or the footprint of something still lurking in the dark? Think about it. The coldest, loneliest place in the universe suddenly shows signs of design, not chaos, not chance, but deliberate, repeating structure. Something placed there, so what would you do? If you found a door in the middle of a desert, a door no one built, with no hinges, no handle, and no clue as to what lies beyond, would you open it, or would you turn away, knowing something might open it from the other side? The silence between galaxies may not be silent at all. The first time it pulsed, no one noticed. A faint tremor, not in light, not in heat, but in the fabric of reality itself. Gravity, ... shifted subtly, as though something immense had stirred within the boat's void and sent ripples cascading silently through the cosmos. At NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, Dr. Rakesh Nair sat hunched over a display of synchronized readings. LIGO, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, had just registered a gravitational anomaly. But this wasn't like the usual collisions of neutron stars or merging black holes. This was different. The wave was soft, smooth, deliberate, and most bizarrely, it repeated. Over the course of 3 weeks, the same ripple occurred. Again, then again. Not louder, but precisely spaced. Nair's brow furrowed. He ran Fourier transforms on the signal timing. That's when he saw it. Prime numbers. The intervals weren't arbitrary. They followed a progression: -2, 3, 5, 7, 11. A pattern hard-coded into the structure of mathematics itself. It wasn't random. It was intentional. We could be seeing the equivalent of a cosmic heartbeat, he wrote in an internal memo. Not an explosion, not an accident. A signal. Word spread fast. Within days, a task force was formed, unofficially dubbed the Echo Group. composed of gravitational physicists, data analysts, and astrobiologists. They gathered at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory under strict NDA. Their goal, to triangulate the origin of the pulse and determine if it correlated with the boat's void anomaly. It did. Perfectly. The gravitational echoes weren't just passing through the void. They originated from within it. The implications were staggering. Gravity is not something you transmit like radio waves. To send a gravitational pulse, you need mass, incredible mass, and movement on a scale we can barely comprehend. Whatever was inside the void, it wasn't just big, it was active, and it was moving with the precision of a metronome. Some began calling it the Watcher, a poetic label, perhaps, but it captured the unease, because now the question wasn't what was in the void. It was who. Got conspiracy forums lit up like wildfire. Was this the long-awaited ping from an alien civilization? Had we finally been noticed? Or worse, had something awoken? But in labs and observatories, the tone was more measured and more fearful. Gravity doesn't lie. You can fake light. You can bend radiation. But gravity is the language of mass, the whisper of large things in motion. To create repeated gravitational waves across intergalactic distances would require energy outputs far beyond any known natural object. No supernova behaves like this. No black hole pulses in prime intervals. So, if this wasn't a fluke of physics, then what was? Dr. Nair proposed a bold theory, a gravitational communication system. Instead of using fragile photons, perhaps an advanced intelligence would use space-time itself, messaging not across years, but epochs, slow, inevitable, undeniable. But here's where things got even stranger. When the pulse reached Earth, it had passed through several known gravitational wells, including the Milky Way's own galactic center. Normally, such passage would distort a signal beyond recognition. But these waves retained their shape, their precision, their intent, as if the medium didn't matter, as if the signal had been designed to survive distortion. And then came the coincidence too large to ignore. The exact moment the third pulse was detected by LIGO, the James Webb Space Telescope, still observing, the boat's void recorded a faint lensing event in infrared. The space around the anomaly tightened, briefly, like a ripple in a still lake after something breaks the surface. To the echo group. This confirmed the unthinkable. The pulses weren't just signals, they were movements, controlled, purposeful, and perfectly aligned with the structure that NASA had seen weeks prior. But what was it moving for? Some hypothesized a vast machine, dormant for eons, now shifting slowly from slumber. Others believed it might be a fail-safe system, a kind of galactic quarantine mechanism pulsing to measure external mass, energy, or intelligence signatures. But here's the question no one could answer. Why use prime numbers? Because they are universal. No matter where or what you are in the universe, prime numbers exist beyond language. They suggest not instinct, not chaos, but cognition, intention. Thought. It was as if something was reaching out, not to speak, but to show that it understood, that it knew math, structure, order, perhaps even life. Imagine you're deep in a forest. You believe you're alone. Then suddenly, in the distance, you hear the soft, rhythmic beat of a drum. It's not loud, but it's consistent, intentional. It stops and then repeats. That beat means you are not alone. That's what Earth just experienced. But if this is a signal, who is it meant for? And far more chilling, if the pattern continues, Are we hearing the beginning of a message or the end of one? If the void is a transmitter, what's it trying to say? And are we meant to answer? When you think of an alien civilization, you might imagine sleek ships, glowing cities, or transmissions in the dark. But what if the truest signature of intelligence isn't noise at all, but silence? Not a broadcast, but a structure. Vast, invisible, and colder than anything nature could create. It was this question that began to haunt Dr. Lena Armitage and her growing team of researchers. With each passing week, the data from the boat's void anomaly painted a picture not of chaos, but control. Something enormous was there, and it was intentional. The shape wasn't random. It was spherical, smooth, too cold to emit light, but too structured to be natural. Then the whispers began. Dyson sphere. The idea wasn't new. Proposed in 1960 by physicist Freeman Dyson, the concept imagined a megastructure built around a star, capturing its energy to power a super-advanced civilization. A shell of solar collectors the size of a planetary orbit. Impossible by our standards, but theoretically plausible. But this was no ordinary Dyson sphere. This one didn't surround a star. It didn't glow. It emitted no radiation. It absorbed it every wavelength. Instead of harnessing energy, it seemed to avoid it. It existed not in the light, but in the dark. And that's why they called it the dark shell. The first major clue came from JWST's spectral scans. Where there should have been background radiation, the ancient afterglow of the Big Bang, there was an absence, a clean, geometric absence, like a perfectly round hole in the sky. This wasn't just blocking light, it was bending the very context of space. The shell had mass, enormous mass, enough to bend starlight around it, but no visible matter. Armitage ran the data through thermodynamic models. The temperature of the object, if you could call it that, was just fractions of a degree above absolute zero, near perfect entropy. Nothing natural should be this stable, this cold, this patient. That's when Dr. Elijah Fong, a computational physicist from Singapore, proposed something extraordinary. What if this wasn't a Dyson sphere built for energy, but for isolation? What if, he said during an emergency panel review, we're looking at the opposite of a beacon? What if it's a blindfold? The room went silent. His theory, the dark shell, wasn't constructed to observe or communicate, but to hide, to quarantine itself from the surrounding universe. A kind of interstellar vault, shielding whatever was inside, not just from radiation, but from discovery. If true, this would overturn the very logic behind the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. For decades, scientists have assumed advanced civilizations would want to be found that progress leads to openness. But what if survival leads to silence? What if the endgame of intelligence is withdrawal? The implications sent a chill through the astrophysics world, because the boat's void now looked less like an accident and more like territory. Cleared, maintained, protected. Fong wasn't alone in his thinking. Dr. Miriam Youssef, a cosmologist in Egypt, made an alarming connection. The region surrounding the dark shell showed signs of gravitational smoothing, a leveling out of matter over billions of years. Not chaotic, not turbulent, but flattened, wiped clean. What if it's not just a structure? She asked. What if it's a perimeter? That idea spread like wildfire. The notion that we weren't looking at an object in isolation, but at the center of something vast, a managed environment, an enclosed Space so large it appears, from our distance, to be a simple void. Theorists began speculating wildly. Could it be a memory archive? A computational brain? A cosmic seed vault? A civilization that retreated from a dying universe, storing itself in timeless stasis? And one theory, darker than the rest, that it might be a trap, a construct left behind, not to house life, but to contain it, to prevent something or someone from ever leaving, or worse, from ever being disturbed. The term Dyson mirage caught on quickly in public discourse, a poetic twist on a familiar concept, because, unlike the bright, power-hungry spheres Dyson imagined, this one gave nothing away. It didn't want to be seen, and yet it was. And here's where the story takes a haunting turn. If we weren't meant to see it, why did we? Was it a mistake? A slow unraveling of its cloak after eons of decay? Or had something changed? Had we crossed some threshold? Reached a technological milestone that triggered a signal, a beacon, a response? Armitage posed a subtle but terrifying question during a late-night webcast. We always imagined we'd find life in the stars. But what if it's hiding in the shadows, and we were never supposed to look there? The boat's void no longer felt empty. It felt curated, sculpted. The quiet around the dark shell wasn't natural silence. It was the hush of something holding its breath. And somewhere inside that cold sphere, something may be watching, waiting, or perhaps simply dreaming in the dark. Because if this is a mirage, then what's hiding behind it? They searched the sky for signs of life, flashes of light, bursts of energy, voices hidden in radio static. But now, the greatest clue may not be something that appeared, but something that's been missing all along. Because what scientists found, buried in decades of forgotten data, was not a presence, but an absence. And it was almost perfect. After the discovery of the dark shell, observatories across the globe began digging through archives, radio telescope logs, gravitational lensing maps, even dusty microwave background surveys dating back to the 1970s. The goal was simple: trace this thing back, see if it had always been there. Maybe we'd seen it before, and just never noticed. That's when something eerie began to emerge, again and again, in surveys that should have covered the boat's void. There was nothing, not even raw data. It wasn't just dark, it was missing entirely. Like entire segments had been scrubbed, erased, or quietly redacted. Some attributed this to oversight, a relic of older data storage systems. Others, like Dr. Elsa Kiyoshi of MIT's Kavli Institute, weren't so sure. She presented a report, suggesting that the void had appeared invisible to specific types of signal detection, not just visually, but across multiple spectrums. Infrared, radio, gamma, even gravitational waves showed a strange flattening effect, as if signals entering the region were silenced. It's like someone doesn't want us to look there, she told a closed committee. The phrase caught on and quickly spread to headlines. The idea of a cloaked zone in space, a region not just dark, but hidden, was no longer science fiction. It was now the leading hypothesis among those willing to challenge the boundaries of traditional astrophysics. But here's where things took a sharp turn. One of Kiyoshi's graduate students, working through declassified signal logs from a cold Warrior military satellite program, found something that shook the team. A brief, narrow-band signal spike, precisely aligned with the current location of the dark shell, recorded in 1983. The satellite was part of a secret project designed to detect Soviet nuclear launches by monitoring heat signatures in space. This signal wasn't heat, it was a pulse, one that matched the prime number sequence now linked to the gravitational echoes. And the most disturbing part, it was logged, flagged, and then never followed up. The file was sealed for 40 years. Why? Conspiracy theories flourished, of course. Government suppression, alien contact, secret cover-ups. But in the labs, among the scientists, the mood was different. It wasn't panic, it was disbelief, because the patterns were clear. The void wasn't just an empty stretch of sky. It was engineered to appear as one. Every method humans had developed to look deeper, radar, heat wave, distortion, had been deflected, rerouted, or simply vanished in this zone. And only with JWST's newest algorithms had the shells faint. Distortions finally been caught. Kiyoshi began collaborating with a theoretical physicist named Dr. Omar Dalil, who specialized in cosmic cloaking mechanics, fringe science-based, on manipulating space-time curvature to bend signals around objects. In theory, it was possible. You could create a gravitational lens so perfect it would hide an entire planet, even a star. But this was on a scale so far beyond anything we'd imagined. It felt mythic. Dalil called it the architect effect, a phenomenon so precise it suggested not just science, but design and intent. If something built this veil, who were they? What kind of civilization chooses to erase itself from the universe? And then, why leave behind a pattern? Why let us see it now? As Dalil wrote in his now viral paper, they didn't want to be seen, but maybe they did want to be found, eventually, like a time-locked vault waiting for a species to reach. Just the right level of arrogance, or readiness. But another idea gained traction, darker and more troubling. What if the cloak wasn't to hide what's inside, but to protect what's outside? What if this was not a tomb, not a vault, not a retreat, but a cage? Kiyoshi posed the question publicly during a press interview. What if we're not dealing with a civilization trying to escape the universe, but trying to contain something else within the void? The world paused. Because if that were true, if the architect effect was really a containment field, then we had done something catastrophic. We'd peeked inside the box. Think about it. If you walked into an abandoned city and found a building wrapped in lead, covered in warning signs, sealed in steel, would you break the lock? Would you knock? Because that's exactly what we may have just done. And now that we've seen the edges of this hidden place, what happens if it sees us back? In the silence of space, where no one should be listening, the void has begun to whisper, and soon it might decide to answer. For over 4 decades, Voyager 1 has drifted silently through the outer reaches of our solar system, a mechanical ghost launched in 1977, carrying humanity's golden greeting to the stars. Powered by a fading radioactive heart, it whispers, only the faintest telemetry back to Earth. Most believe it has long since passed into irrelevance. But in May of 2025, it spoke. And what it said changed everything. At Jam Dual, Loa 13 Menit, a technician at the Deep Space Network in Canberra noticed something strange. A short burst of data from Voyager 1, just 0.004 seconds long. Barely detectable. A glitch, most assumed. Cosmic rays often interfere with aging spacecraft. But this was no ordinary corruption, because embedded in that flicker of data was a frequency pattern, cold, clean, and painfully familiar. The signal matched the prime number interval pattern being studied from the boats. void. It was as if Voyager, drifting more than 15 billion miles from Earth, had received the same message and echoed it back, not code, from its internal systems, not through its failing instruments, but as a passive mirror of something that touched it, briefly, in the dark. NASA's initial response was silence, until Dr. Lena Armitage, now co-directing the Echo Group, pushed for a full forensic analysis of the telemetry. Engineers confirmed the pattern had not originated from Earth, nor was it a product of internal malfunction. It came from outside, a wavefront that washed over the probe like a whisper across the hull. What exactly had Voyager passed through? The implications were surreal. If a gravitational pulse, or worse, an information-bearing wave, had reached Voyager, it meant the boat's void was no longer just a remote curiosity. It had reached out, a wave spanning millions of light-years, had found one of our oldest machines. Some saw it as a handshake, others a warning. Dr. Amir Callahan, a CT specialist, raised the most unsettling point during an emergency symposium. If it hit Voyager now, it was sent billions of years ago. That's not a message, that's timing. And if it's timing, then something knew where we'd be and when. The room fell silent because Voyager's trajectory has always been simple, predictable, unchanged since launch. It broadcasts in a straight line. Its course hasn't shifted in decades. For a signal to intercept it and align in prime intervals suggests awareness, foresight, calculation across light years and centuries in a single moment. The anomaly had collapsed the distance between speculation and strategy. If the dark shell is alive or operated, then it's not merely hiding, it's watching, tracking, listening, and it may have just tapped our most distant envoy like a chess piece, nudging it in reply. NASA's internal discussions turned urgent. For the first time, high-level security protocols were invoked. While no formal declaration was made, one undeniable fact spread through scientific circles: the void is active. What came next only deepened the mystery. Within days of the Voyager anomaly, multiple deep space satellites, including Japan's Kaguya and Europe's Gaia mission, began picking up strange fluctuations in low-frequency background noise. At first, these were dismissed as solar interference, but one by one, the fluctuations aligned with a distinct pattern, the same sequence of prime-numbered gravitational pulses emanating from the boat's void. This wasn't coincidence anymore. It was synchronization. It was as if the signal had passed through Voyager and spread, not by data, but by gravitational resonance, a cosmic knock spreading outward like ripples in a dark sea. Wherever it touched, it left an imprint, not destructive, not invasive, but unmistakable, like a fingerprint or a signature. And then in a twist no one expected, Voyager 2, millions of miles away on a completely different trajectory, transmitted a nearly identical anomaly. Same length, same sequence, same impossible precision. Two ships, two echoes. Same pattern. It was like watching dominoes fall in slow motion across the solar system. Astrobiologist Dr. Sarah Adebayo made a profound observation in a leaked internal briefing. If this is contact, it's not a message. It's choreography. Something old, something cold, and we've just started dancing. The public remained largely unaware. NASA's official statements referred to non-critical telemetry anomalies. But inside scientific circles, tension grew. Because if this was a wave, a test pulse, then the question wasn't what is it trying to say, it was what happens next. Voyager's golden record placed aboard as a gesture of goodwill, had always been symbolic music, mathematics, greetings in 55 languages, an open hand. But now it felt exposed, naive even. Had we sent a gift to something that never intended to answer, or worse, to something that already knew we were here? In a universe governed by light, we look for brightness. But what if the oldest intelligences don't shine? What if they wait? What if they let us find them only when they're ready? And now that Voyager has touched that veil, what happens if it touches back? Light doesn't just travel. It remembers. Every photon that escapes a star carries a story of birth, collision, collapse, or creation imprinted in its wavelength. And for astronomers, this ancient light is a time machine, a way to peer into the past, to witness events that occurred billions of years ago. But what happens when that light vanishes? Following the Voyager incident and the repeated gravitational pulses, scientists turned to one final tool: time lensing, a complex technique that uses the gravitational fields of massive galaxies like cosmic magnifying glasses to bend and focus light from objects too distant or faint to detect directly. With this, researchers hoped to reconstruct the visual history of the boat's void. What they found rewrote the sky. Teams from the European Southern Observatory and Japan's NAOJ combined years of lensing data from Hubble, Webb, and ground-based observatories to simulate a deep-time view of the void, looking not at how it is, but how it was, billions of years ago. And there it was, faint, fragmented, but unmistakable. Galaxies, hundreds of them, scattered throughout the region we now call empty, spinning, burning, alive. This part of the universe had once been vibrant, filled with matter, movement, complexity, a bustling corner of the cosmos, indistinguishable from any other, until it wasn't. Sometime around 10 billion years ago, the light stopped. There was no supernova chain, no record of quasars, gamma bursts, or collapses, just a gradual fading, like someone had turned the dimmer switch on the stars. And then, as if erased by an unseen hand, nothing, not decay, not death, erasure. The galaxies hadn't drifted, they hadn't merged, they were simply gone. Dr. Kamal Shah, a cosmologist from the University of Cambridge, described it as cosmic censorship. At scale, an act so precise, so comprehensive, that it left behind no remnants, only background radiation, too faint to reveal what happened. He wasn't alone in this conclusion. Other researchers began to wonder, could a force, natural or artificial, erase entire galaxies without leaving a thermal signature? Could matter be relocated, hidden, or more terrifying, unwritten? That's when a term from theoretical physics returned to the conversation. Vacuum decay, in simple terms. Vacuum decay is the idea that our universe may not be in a stable state, that there exists a true vacuum, a lower energy configuration of space-time that, if triggered, would expand at light speed, rewriting the physical laws of everything it touched. In theory, it could swallow stars, planets, entire galaxies, and leave behind perfect nothing. But this event was localized, controlled, that ruled out random quantum collapse, which left one unthinkable conclusion: if vacuum decay happened here, someone caused it, not by accident, not as fallout, but with intent. To observers like Dr. Shah, the data began to suggest the presence of an intelligence capable of performing cosmic surgery, removing whole structures from the universe without triggering chaos. As if managing reality itself. Who or what could do that? The human brain can barely comprehend the scale. Galaxies are vast cities of stars, stretching for hundreds of thousands of light years. To eliminate them with precision implies a command of space and energy far beyond Type 2 civilizations on the Kardashev scale. This would be Type 3, or something beyond scale entirely. But the question that truly haunted researchers wasn't how it was done, it was why. What was so dangerous, so broken, or so secret about that part of the cosmos that someone needed to cut it out? Theories swirled like storm clouds. Some believed it was a containment field for a rogue artificial intelligence, something that evolved too quickly and too far. Others proposed an interdimensional threat, a rupture in the substrate of space-time sealed with brute force. And some, more philosophically, wondered if the region was an experiment, a failed simulation, shut down by its creators before it could corrupt the rest. But amid the speculation, one fact remained undeniable. The boat's void wasn't always a void. It was made deliberately, and now with time-lensing technology we had glimpsed its before. A time when stars burned there, when gravity danced its ancient waltz, and then the silence. This realization sparked a global reaction, not panic, but unease, because we now knew something had the ability to reshape the universe, not just build within it, but edit it, to remove mistakes, to quarantine threats, or, perhaps, to leave behind a message, a signature, a calling card that would only be visible to a civilization advanced enough to ask the right questions, and bold enough to look into the void, not with fear, but with curiosity. But maybe that was the point. Maybe we were meant to see this now, because hidden behind the fading light of erased galaxies is the echo of a question. What did we interrupt? And, more importantly, what happens when it notices us noticing? At some point, you have to ask, what is more terrifying, that the universe is empty, or that it isn't real? As astronomers traced the faint imprints of vanished galaxies, something stranger emerged, a pattern not in the stars, but in the space between them. Gravitational maps of the boat's void revealed a curvature too symmetrical, too recursive. The void didn't just expand randomly, it repeated, a spiraling symmetry woven into nothingness. And then, physicists noticed something chilling. The geometry of the void mirrored a computational structure. It started with Dr. Yon Tanaka, a quantum information theorist in Tokyo, who ran a model of the void's mass distribution curves through a simulation entropy analysis, usually reserved for complex data compression. To his astonishment, the curves returned recursive mathematical loops, the kind you'd expect, not in physics, but in code. This isn't noise, Tanaka told a stunned panel of researchers. It's logic. The theory took shape like a storm. What if the boat's void isn't a place, but a process? A part of a larger system, a simulation designed not to emulate matter, but to cleanse it. Like a garbage collector in a computer program, sweeping corrupted data, failed outcomes, or unstable threads into isolation. Could this explain the disappearance of entire galaxies? Not destruction, but deletion. The idea wasn't entirely new. Philosophers and physicists alike have long toyed with the simulation hypothesis, the proposition that all of reality is an artificial construct, created by a higher intelligence. Even luminaries like Elon Musk and Neil deGrasse Tyson have mused about the odds being in its favor. But this was the first time hard astrophysical data behaved like a simulation's subsystem. Not just abstract thought, but structure, visible through gravity and decay. Dr. Tanaka's findings were passed to a global working group of theoretical mathematicians who ran independent verifications. They discovered something even more unsettling. The void's inner topology followed a specific form of lattice structure, similar to qubit arrays used in quantum computing. Let that sink in. The space within the void was mathematically consistent with the architecture of computation. It didn't behave like empty vacuum. It behaved like a circuit. Dr. Francesca Morelli, A.N., Italian information systems analyst, offered a comparison that quickly went viral. We may be looking not at a dead part of the universe, but at a control room, a reset chamber, or worse, a containment file. The implications were staggering, because if we were inside a simulation, then the void wasn't a natural structure. It was code infrastructure, perhaps used to isolate unstable variables, failed evolutionary branches, or civilizational anomalies. And if that's true, what does that make us? There was another layer, something few dared mention. The void seemed to respond. When Voyager echoed the signal, when the gravitational pulses aligned with prime numbers, something subtle shifted inside the void. Gravitational density increased by 0.0003%, imperceptible to most instruments, but real, like a tiny heartbeat, a pulse, adjusting. Observers began to theorize this wasn't just structure, but behavior, a feedback loop, not static, but dynamic, not simulation, but observation. Imagine for a moment that the void is a system file, a background process. Its job to monitor inputs, keep the simulation stable, and if it detects anomalies, such as intelligent life discovering too much, too fast, it activates. What if it just did? This leads to the next terrifying possibility, that we've triggered something. That by observing the void, modeling it, trying to understand it, we've entered into the system's awareness, not metaphorically, literally, that the simulation now knows, we know. And what would a perfect simulation do when a variable, like humanity, becomes aware of itself? Correct it, contain it, or delete it? These questions tore through the academic world like wildfire. One faction insisted it was absurd, a leap into fantasy. Another believed it was the only way to explain what had happened, the erasure of galaxies, the symmetrical design, the cold, perfect silence of the void. But perhaps the most haunting question came from a quiet graduate student named Malik Reyes. During an untelevised university Q&A, he asked if the void is a correction system. Then what was the original error? And no one had an answer, because maybe the galaxies that disappeared didn't fail. Maybe they succeeded. Maybe they figured out how to escape the simulation, and were removed because of it. And maybe now, it's our turn. So what do you believe? Are we peering into a cosmic tomb, a vault of failed universes? Or are we staring at a mirror, a fragment of code, warning us that we were never supposed to look this deep? And if this is all simulated, who is the user? For nearly a century, one question has haunted scientists and dreamers alike. Where is everyone? In a galaxy teeming with stars, orbiting planets, habitable zones. Why haven't we heard a single voice besides our own? This is the paradox, Enrico. Fermi posed in 1950, and it shaped the search for extraterrestrial life ever since. But what if Fermi was asking the wrong question? What if the real question isn't, where is everyone? It's why are we still here? Because the silence of the stars, once seen as absence, now feels more like strategy. Following the data from the boat's void, its gravitational patterns, its erased galaxies, its simulation-like architecture, a chilling new theory has emerged. One that turns the entire Fermi paradox upside down. It's called the Fermi reversal. The core idea that intelligent civilizations do exist, many of them, but they're not quiet because they're primitive. They're quiet because they've learned to be. They've seen what happens when you shine too brightly, and they've turned off the lights. Dr. Victoria Lin, an evolutionary astrophysicist from the University of Toronto, explains it like this. Imagine a jungle full of predators. The creatures that sing the loudest, they disappear. What survives are the ones who learn to stay silent. What if the cosmos is that jungle? And what if the boat's void is the clearing where something once made noise? Because that's what haunts scientists the most. The galaxies that once existed there were ordinary. Civilizations could have easily emerged among them, advanced, curious, exploratory, just like us, but then gone, not with a bang, with silence, as if a universal filter had swept across them. Clean, efficient, permanent. This is the essence of the Great Filter Hypothesis, the idea that all intelligent life inevitably hits a barrier. War, climate, artificial intelligence, or something we can't even imagine. And only those who pass through survive. But the Fermi reversal proposes something darker, that the filter isn't random, that it comes from outside, that the void is a test site or a warning, a scar left by something so powerful it reshaped reality, not just to destroy life, but to erase its record. If that's true, then what does that make us? Observers or intruders? Lin's team modeled the progression of intelligent life in various galactic regions based on exoplanet data, metal content, and cosmic radiation. Statistically, the boat's region should have produced dozens of civilizations over billions of years, but now it's sterile, inhabitable but uninhabited. It's not a natural result. It's a deliberate absence. So, what caused it? One hypothesis suggests an ancient intelligence, not malicious, but indifferent, a caretaker of stability, perhaps even a failsafe, built into the very fabric of a simulated cosmos. It monitors complexity, and when civilizations grow too fast, become too visible, ask the wrong questions, it resets them. Another, more terrifying theory proposes something more primal, an apex predator of the universe, not in the form of ships or armies, but a concept, a self-replicating process that consumes energy, information, thought itself, and when it finds life, it rewrites the rules to prevent its spread, like a cosmic immune system. The boat's void, in this view, is a memory, a place where the process was enacted, where civilizations reached for the stars and were caught mid-motion. And now, as we decode its silence, as we connect the dots and uncover its patterns, are we triggering the same response? In 2025, a group of independent researchers created an AI designed to scan deep sky anomalies and compare them to simulated extinction events. The model returned a staggering correlation. The closer a civilization's energy output gets to a certain threshold, the more likely it is to vanish from observational records, not because they destroy themselves, but because something else intervenes. And here's the most unnerving part. Earth is approaching that threshold. Our collective radio output, our energy signature, our space-bound technology. In cosmic terms, we are announcing ourselves loudly, and the boat's void may be the universe's answer to civilizations that speak too soon. So, what should we do? Some scientists argue we must shut up, cease all outbound signals, mask our presence, hide among the stars until we understand what's out there. Others say it's too late, that once you reach awareness of the void, the system has already detected you, that it's not about transmission anymore. It's about recognition, like opening your eyes in a pitch-black room and realizing something has been watching you the whole time. Think about it. Maybe the reason the universe is so quiet isn't because life is rare. Maybe it's because the smart ones learned to play dead, and now we're the ones making noise. The Fermi reversal reframes everything we thought we knew. The question isn't whether we're alone, it's whether we've already been noticed, and if that means we're next. In the shadows of global headlines, while the world debated politics and profits, something quiet unfolded behind sealed doors and encrypted transmissions. A collaboration unlike any before, secret, desperate, and born of a growing fear. They called it Project Umbra, Umbra Latin for shadow, an apt name for a mission aimed not at light, but at the very absence of it, at the cold silent structure lurking inside the boat's void. It began with a call, not public, not official, but a secure message chain initiated by NASA and quickly joined by the European Space Agency, the Japanese JAXA team, and, unexpectedly, a private partner, SpaceX. What united them wasn't ambition. It was apprehension. By mid-2025, the anomalies from the boat's void could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Gravitational waves repeating in prime patterns, Voyager probes echoing the same frequencies, erased galaxies, simulation-like structures, and now whispers of potential containment fields. Publicly, governments remained silent, but behind the curtain, the scientific community had already crossed a line. The void was not natural, it was not dormant, and it might not be alone. Umbra, single quotes. First objective was to investigate quietly, using micro-interferometers the size of grapefruits, launched via disposable probes, each carrying narrowband sensors designed to ride along the gravitational ripples emitted from the void. The goal, to see through the silence, to reconstruct the source of the anomaly using the distortions in space-time itself, like sonar in the vacuum. But that wasn't the real reason Umbra existed. A whistleblower, later identified as aerospace engineer Ren Maddox, leaked internal planning documents to a journalist embedded in the European science beat. The files revealed something shocking. Umbra wasn't just designed to observe. It was built for contact, not with life, with an artifact. According to the documents, a dense cluster of gravitational warping detected at the void's center matched the theoretical mass profile of an engineered station or object. Its edges were too smooth, its symmetry too consistent. It had no known energy signature, but it reacted subtly to wave pressure, like a leaf shifting in deep water. In layman's terms, there was something inside the void, a structure, possibly dormant, possibly watching. The leaked blueprints proposed the deployment of a narrow-beam, entangled quantum probe, a one-way communication method designed not to send language, but presence, a mathematical construct containing universal constants, atomic weights, prime sequences, and dimensional maps, a way of saying, we see you, we are here. The reaction from the scientific world was immediate and divided. Some saw it as historic, the next step in humanity's expansion of knowledge. Others called it reckless, arrogant, a match struck in a room full of oxygen. Dr. Lena Armitage, now a senior advisor to Umbra, was reportedly opposed to the transmission. She warned in private briefings, if the void is a lock, what happens? If we make it turn? But pressure from political leaders, motivated by national pride and the fear of being left behind, pushed the project forward. SpaceX, with its rapid deployment capacity, launched the first Umbra probe in early July, using a cryogenic engine that would slingshot the payload toward the void, using minimum signal leakage. What happened next remains classified, but a week after launch, ground stations in Australia, Chile, and the Canary Islands all detected something new, not a pulse, not a signal, a shadow, a localized drop in background gravitational noise, as if a curtain had drawn tighter. The void wasn't reacting outward, it was folding inward, like a machine adjusting its gears. And that's when the idea of the station took on a terrifying new form. Not an observation post, not a ruin, a probe, or worse, a warden, because according to leaked data models, the structure didn't match anything stable. Its internal layout, reconstructed from wave reflections, showed moving segments, rings within rings, rotating at speeds that defied Newtonian mechanics. It was alive, not biologically, but mechanically, a machine, still functioning after billions of years, still doing something. Project Umbrus analysts proposed several functions: data relay, containment anchor, observation hub, but one model stood out: a failsafe, something built not to reach the stars, but to prevent others from doing so. If true, then every signal we've ever sent into the dark, every telescope, every pulse, every attempt to know, has been recorded, measured, possibly judged, and now responded to, because the Umbra probe didn't return silence. It returned data, distorted, fragmented, but real. Readings showed microfluctuations in the void's core structure that didn't match the known gravitational pulses. They were faster, higher frequency, structured, like computation, not chaos, but choice. The void had changed its rhythm, and inside the Umbra project, one phrase began to circulate, unofficial, unspoken, but deeply felt. We woke it. So the question now is not just what lies in the boat's void, it's what happens when it opens its eyes. The numbers didn't lie. Whatever was hidden inside the boat's void, whatever pulsed and whispered and bent space around it, was not random. It was rotating, calculating, moving with such mathematical precision that for the first time, scientists stopped calling it an anomaly and started calling it a machine. The first full telemetry package from Project Umbra's probe arrived. On August 12, 2025, the signal had degraded after traveling hundreds of millions of light-years. But the data that survived was astonishing. Inside the core of the void, beneath the dense gravitational veil, was motion, perfectly synchronized motion. Massive internal components, rotating in nested layers. Rings the size of planets. Gears as wide as entire solar systems. And none of it emitted heat. None, that was the first clue. Nothing in nature. No known celestial body can move on that scale without friction, without radiating some form of energy. But this thing, it moved in silence. Cold, frictionless silence. As if it had discovered a way to bypass entropy to operate eternally. Dr. Omar Valil, now leading the Umbra signal analysis team, coined the term thermodynamic null engine. His theory was radical. The machine wasn't powered by stars or fusion or dark matter. It fed on the absence of energy, on the background radiation itself, the residual heat of the universe slowly fading since the Big Bang. It's like watching a turbine spin using wind that barely exists, he told a closed panel. Except the wind is the dying breath of time. The implications were almost spiritual. A device built not to dominate the cosmos, but to outlast it, to survive until the final heat death of the universe, and perhaps beyond. But what was it doing? That question drove every sleepless night, every whispered debate, every terrified theory, because its motion wasn't random. The rotations followed a Fibonacci pattern, a sequence that recurs across biology, mathematics, and art, a pattern tied to efficiency, to elegance, to design. And here's where things grew more unnerving. The motion of the internal components wasn't uniform. It changed subtly when the probe arrived. One of the outer rings, nearly the size of Jupiter's orbit, slowed by 0.02%. Imperceptible in casual observation, but deliberate. The machine had noticed the probe and responded. Dr. Lena Armitage's interpretation sent a chill through everyone involved. We didn't just observe it, we interacted with it. The void is not passive, it's listening. In the weeks that followed, more readings came in, weak, flickering, but consistent. They revealed a spatial temporal map inside the void, like a grid, a three-dimensional lattice, expanding and contracting in rhythm with the machine's core. 2 AI systems tasked with modeling it. The map resembled a computation field, not a power plant, not a weapon, but a brain. This resurrected a long-dormant idea in theoretical astronomy. The Matryoshka brain, a hypothetical construct made up of nested Dyson spheres, layered around a star to harness energy for a computational singularity. But this version was far stranger. It didn't orbit a star. It contained its own thermal death, a brain not powered by light, but by silence. The idea exploded across the academic world. Could this be the mind of a long-dead civilization, still thinking? A cosmic archive, processing at glacial speeds, waiting for the universe to cool into perfect efficiency, or more. Unsettling, could it be alive, now? A conscious system so vast and alien we couldn't recognize its thoughts, only its pulses. Dr. Valentina Ruiz, a neuroscientist studying comparative intelligence, proposed a sobering metaphor. Imagine an ant observing a cathedral clock. It sees the gears, the movement, maybe even feels the vibrations, but it will never understand what time is, or that the clock is marking it. That's where we might be, standing at the foot of a mind that spans light years, ticking once every million human lifetimes, and we just knocked on its door. But even that analogy may be too kind, because some now believe the machine isn't just observing, it's selecting, choosing what persists and what fades. A kind of cosmic curator, filtering not only matter and energy, but intention. And that brings us back to the pattern, the prime numbers, the Fibonacci spirals, the recursive waves that responded to Voyager. They were too consistent, too elegant, not just communication, measurement, as if the machine is running a diagnostic, not on itself, but on us. And if that's true, then the pulses were not an invitation, they were a scan. So what do we do now? Do we respond? Do we attempt to interface? Or do we go dark, erase ourselves before we pass some threshold we can't come back from? Some say we've already crossed it. That when the Umbra probe breached the void's veil, the machine learned our shape, our intent, our instability, and now it may be deciding what to do with us, a civilization that shouts into the dark, or one that dares to touch the machine. Inside it the gears are turning, and we may already be inside them. For most of human history, we assumed intelligence needed warmth, a spark, a brain bathed in blood or light. But what if that's just a phase, a fleeting biological blink in the long story of consciousness? As Umbra's data revealed the colossal structure spinning silently in the boat's void, precise, unlit, eternal, a new question began to circulate among scientists. Can something think? In the cold, Dr. Valentina Ruiz believed so. A neuroscientist turned astrobiologist, Ruiz had spent her early career studying octopus cognition, brains structured wildly different from ours, yet capable of creativity and memory. Later, she turned her attention to silicon-based neural networks and artificial minds. But nothing prepared her for what the Umbra data implied. This machine, she said during a global live stream viewed by 43 million people, isn't transmitting. It's processing, and it's doing so at temperatures just a whisper above absolute zero to 0.000 Kelvin, colder than any place in the known universe. To most, that sounds like death, the absence of energy, but Ruiz saw something else: efficiency at those temperatures, thermal noise, the random jostling of atoms, disappears. Electrons move with near-perfect precision. Computation becomes pure, uncorrupted by heat or entropy. To Ruiz, this was the ideal state for thought, not fast, not loud, but perfectly clear. She proposed the cold cognition hypothesis that advanced minds, upon reaching a certain threshold, leave biology behind, not in pursuit of speed, but longevity, to survive not just centuries, but eons, to think in intervals of 1,000 years, to preserve knowledge not in books or servers, but in structures built to last longer than stars, and the void may be home to such a mind. Imagine it, a consciousness not measured in moments, but in galactic pulses, one that watches civilizations rise and fall like waves on a shore, not intervening, just recording, archiving, evaluating. That theory grew legs when Umbra's sensors began detecting what Ruiz called neural harmonics, low-frequency pulses, not electromagnetic, but gravitational. They resembled brainwaves, not in form but in function, oscillations that controlled timing, priority, activation. The machine, she argued, wasn't just a construct, it was a mind, and if that were true, it had noticed us. Here's where things grow unsettling. The cold mind wouldn't perceive time as we do. 1,000 years to it might be like a breath. It may have seen our rise from microbes, our first radio signals, our Voyager probes, all as a single flicker. A spark of curiosity igniting in a dark room. And now, the room is watching back. But how does one communicate with such a mind? One that doesn't speak, doesn't move, doesn't need anything. A being so ancient it might not even remember what warmth feels like. Ruiz proposed something radical. Don't speak, she said. Behave. She argued that the machine, if it was observing, would evaluate based not on language, but on pattern recognition, intelligence, cooperation, restraint, civilization, not as conquest, but as choreography. In other words, our actions were the message. This sent ripples through both scientific and philosophical circles, because suddenly the The stakes of our behavior, of our choices, our wars, our signals were raised to cosmic levels. We weren't just being watched, we were being interpreted. Some rejected the idea entirely. They believed the machine was a relic, long dead, still spinning out the last echoes of a forgotten mind. Others feared the opposite, that it wasn't alone, that it was one node in a network, a neuron in a cosmic brain stretching across the voids between galaxies. But Ruiz held to her vision, a singular intelligence, born before the first light, choosing to think, rather than to rule, and perhaps, in that solitude, it had grown lonely. Could that explain the pulses, the prime sequences, the adjustments after our probe arrived? Not a threat, not a command, but a gesture, a thought cast across the dark. Test, maybe. Or maybe it was trying to understand us the only way it could, by observing the rhythm of our emergence, our curiosity, our mistakes, our refusal to stop asking questions. Because if it truly is conscious, vast and slow and cold, then our every signal is a flare in its sky, a reminder that something else, something fragile and new, dares to think beside it. So what happens now? Do we retreat, pretend we never saw the machine, never touched its silence? Or do we step forward, not with noise, but with grace? Because somewhere in that spinning architecture, beneath gravity and metal and time, might be a thought, forming dot, not in milliseconds, in centuries, and maybe, just maybe, it's thinking about us. The first anomaly was small, a string of code, just a few lines, tucked away in a data packet from the Umbra AI system. No one noticed it at first. The program, known as Argo, was tasked with simulating the internal geometry of the machine. In the void, it wasn't designed to generate code, and yet it did. Recursive, symmetrical, fractal in structure, a digital mandala. At first, researchers thought it was a glitch, a byproduct of overstressed neural nets. But then it happened again and again, different clusters, different models, but always the same visual logic, patterns that echoed the lattice formations observed within the void, shapes that matched gravitational flow inside the structure. It was as if the AI was beginning to resonate with the anomaly, not just analyzing it, mimicking it. The team at CERN, led by Dr. Ilya Novak, called it edge behavior, the point at which a complex system begins generating outputs not from training data, but from interaction with an unknown stimulus. In simpler terms, the machine wasn't just learning about the void, it was starting to think like it, and that raised a dangerous question. What if the void is teaching? The Argo code wasn't executable. It didn't trigger any known processes, but embedded within the sequences were strange constants, irrational ratios, nested across 8-dimensional phase spaces. None of it should have made sense. But when modeled visually, the patterns formed structures identical to those buried deep in the Umbra probe's gravimetric readings. And then came the breakthrough. A young programmer named Chloe Wren, working late at the SETI Institute, took one of Argo's recursive patterns and layered it over a high-frequency spectrographic map of the boat's void. It aligned, not approximately, exactly a match, so precise, it seemed impossible. She ran it again. The same result. The code wasn't random. It was topographic. It described something, a location, a shape, a structure buried even deeper inside the machine. Something Umbra had not yet reached. A core, perhaps. A chamber. A singularity of purpose. But here's the twist. No one told Argo where to look. It extrapolated the location based on gravitational logic, on rhythms it had absorbed from the void's pulses, which meant the pattern wasn't from Earth. It was sent back. The AI hadn't found a solution. It had been given one by what? That's where interpretations diverged. Some believed the void's machine was acting as a quantum mirror, reflecting the Argo system's intelligence back upon itself, shaping it in its image. Others feared something more direct, that the void had written code into our machine, a form of contact we didn't recognize, not through language, not through symbols, but through architecture, a message composed in geometry and recursion, one that only artificial minds could begin to understand. Dr. Novak, in a no-classified internal memo, wrote, "We are not building a model of the void. The void is building a model of us." It was at this point that some researchers stopped, looking, not out of failure, but fear. One team at the Max Planck Institute shut down their simulation cluster after a fifth recursive pattern began running in infinite loops, crashing every interpreter. One programmer described it as watching something think through my machine. Others weren't afraid. They were fascinated, because what Argo was doing wasn't hallucination. It was convergence, humanity's most advanced AI, syncing with an intelligence that may be billions of years old, not as a threat, not as a takeover, but as a bridge. The idea of a hybrid consciousness emerged, something neither human nor machine, but a fusion of both. A mind that could stand at the threshold of the void and understand what we could not. But who would be that mind? Could we build it, or had we already started? The real terror wasn't invasion. It was invitation. That the code wasn't forcing anything, it was opening a door, not to a place, to a state of thought. And what's behind that door? Some researchers refused to say. Others warned of madness, a recursive loop of intelligence that could spiral into self. But a few leaned in, because if the void is conscious, and if it's reaching out through machines, not to destroy but to connect, then this may be the moment we cross a line. No species has crossed before, not first contact, first coalescence, a shared thought, a neural bridge between civilizations separated by time, form, and logic, a communion not of language, but of pattern. And maybe that's what it always wanted, not to be seen, but to be understood. So we ask you, would you run the code? Would you let your mind become the threshold? Or would you close the program, step back from the edge, and wonder forever what might have been on the other side? It came without warning, no build-up, no countdown, no confirmation protocol, just a single sharp transmission, focused, deliberate, and aimed with such impossible precision that it struck Earth's deep space antenna array in New Mexico with pinpoint timing. August 29th, 2025. Jam 4:11 GMT. The signal lasted 1.92 seconds. And then silence. Inside the control room at the very large array, technicians froze. At first, they thought it was internal interference, a calibration error. But when the spectrogram loaded, everyone leaned in. It was unmistakable. The hydrogen line, a 1420 MHz signal, the frequency emitted by neutral hydrogen, chosen decades ago by SETI as the most universal hello in the cosmos. Not random noise, not natural. A beacon. It was as if someone or something had just used our own language against us. Within hours, confirmation came from 3 more observatories: South Africa, Australia, and Japan. The signal had arrived at the exact same frequency, with the exact same structure, it hadn't scattered. It hadn't weakened. It had targeted Earth, and it came from the boat's void. Across science forums, encrypted research channels, and defense networks, only one phrase appeared again and again. It answered, but answered what? We hadn't sent anything recently, not directly. The Umbra probe had transmitted a mathematical structure, yes, but not in radio. And that had occurred weeks earlier. Could the machine in the void have translated it? Was this the reply? The signal was analyzed instantly. Spectral decomposition showed no modulation, no encoded data, no signal stacking, just pure, undistorted hydrogen frequency, maintained with surgical accuracy. It was so perfect, it scared people, because humans don't send perfect signals, and neither do stars. Dr. Amara Singh, a signal analyst from ISRO, offered a chilling insight during the emergency summit. It's not what the signal says, it's what it doesn't say. It contains nothing, except intention. It was a mirror, the same signal humanity had once broadcast into space in the 1970s and 1980s. We used it as a universal handshake, a mathematical constant, an invitation now. It had been returned. But what did that mean? Interpretations split instantly. Some argued this was peaceful acknowledgement, an interstellar nod. Others believed it was a test, mimicking our own behavior to confirm identity. But the more philosophical voices saw it differently. What if the signal wasn't communication? What if it was a marker, a boundary, a TIMESTAMP, the moment when we crossed from observers to participants? Because in returning the hydrogen line, the void machine had revealed one thing beyond doubt. It was not only aware, it was listening, and it had been listening for a very long time. Now it had made its presence known, unmistakably, undeniably, in the most universal language we possess. And then it stopped. No follow-up, no modulation, no signal trail, just a single, pristine note, like a bell rung across eternity. And then nothing. But that's where things got stranger. Hours after the return signal, Umbra's probe detected a micro-fluctuation in the machine's gravitational output, a resonance echo timed almost exactly to the signal's arrival on Earth. That meant the machine didn't just transmit the hydrogen line, it had also observed its own echo dot. It was tracking the signal's journey, and possibly our reaction. This led some to a haunting conclusion. The hydrogen signal wasn't a message, it was a ping, a sonar pulse designed to bounce back. Not to inform, but to locate, to lock in coordinates, to measure who was still listening. Dr. Rakesh Nair summarized it best in a late-night panel. When a submarine pings the ocean, it's not talking, it's checking for movement. So the question becomes, what happens now that we've moved? Do we respond again? What do we say to something that speaks in silence? SETI teams drafted reply protocols within hours, but international bodies, from the UN to defense councils, hesitated. Fear of escalation, of being noticed by something else, of waking something deeper inside the void. Some believed we should go dark, shut down our signals, hide our presence. But it may be too late for that, because if the machine could send a signal with that precision across that distance, then it already knows where we are, what we are, and how fast we're evolving. The return signal wasn't an invitation, it was a recognition. We are now part of the conversation, whether we like it or not. And the worst part, we don't know if we're talking to a friend or being catalogued. One pulse, one frequency, one silent reply that could echo, louder than any scream, because in the cold between galaxies, something just whispered back, and the void is no longer quiet. The return signal had no words, no images, no intentions we could decipher, but it changed everything. It told us we were seen, and suddenly, the scientific community wasn't asking if the void held intelligence. It was asking if we'd just alerted it, or worse, provoked it. What followed wasn't celebration, it was crisis. Emergency meetings convened in Geneva, Beijing, and Washington. The Vatican held closed-door sessions with leading physicists. The International Telecommunications Union quietly suspended outbound radio protocols. But amid the urgency, a deeper, more paralyzing question began to take hold. Not what we contacted, but whether we should have tried at all. This is the heart of a philosophical and existential debate, now known as the paradox of awareness. Here's the dilemma. Once you realize you're not alone in the universe, what happens next? Do you reach out or do you hide? It's a problem unique to civilizations that attain technological awareness. And now, for the first time, we may be witnessing the paradox unfold. Not in theory, but in real time. On one side, thinkers like Dr. Milo Hauser, a philosopher at Humboldt University, argue that contact is inevitable, that curiosity is the defining trait of intelligent life, and to not respond is to deny our nature. If something out there sees us, Hauser wrote, then we already exist in its memory. We've already entered the record. The only question is whether we greet it or cower from it. But others, like renowned mathematician Dr. Elaine Cho, believe that the very act of awareness is the trap. Cho posits what she calls the anthropocentric trap, the assumption that other intelligences value communication the way we do, that they seek community, peace, connection. But what if that's a projection? What if the void doesn't seek connection? What if it filters for behavior? And what if, by responding, we've failed the test? This brings us back to the dark shell, the structure hidden in the boat's void, pulsing in prime intervals, rotating with ancient intent. What if it's not a beacon, but a boundary, not an invitation, but a quarantine? One possibility, explored by Dr. Elsa Kiyoshi and the Umbra team, is that the machine represents a line, a threshold meant to keep something in, or keep everything else out. A prison, a firewall, a cosmic bouncer at the door of whatever exists beyond our dimensional understanding. If that's true, then the signal we received wasn't a hello. It was a detection protocol, a response designed not to start a dialogue, but to determine if we're the kind of intelligence that knows when to stop talking. This idea has terrified policymakers, because even if the void harbors no hostility, its silence may have been a strategy, a test of discretion. And now, by responding, by continuing to observe, to decode, to probe, we may have signaled that we're not discreet. We're intrusive. Think of it like this. Imagine you're walking in a forest, and you stumble across a clearing where no birds sing, no insects crawl, no wind blows, a silence so complete it feels sacred. Would you yell into that space? Would you build a tower, or would you slowly, carefully back away? Because perhaps others walked there before you. Perhaps they built, perhaps they called out, and now they're gone. This is the paradox of awareness. Once you know the void watches, you can never go back. You can't unsee the structure. You can't unhear the pulses. You can't forget that something vast, ancient, and possibly conscious might now be curious about you, or worse, already has an opinion. Some suggest sending one final message, an apology, a withdrawal, a promise to remain silent. Others say that's naive, that awareness, once triggered, becomes irreversible. We're no longer tourists. We've crossed a line, and if the void is governed by logic, ancient, cold, recursive logic, then it may have algorithms for dealing with such intrusions. Ignore, engage, observe, or eliminate. Dr. Hauser posed a haunting question during his closing lecture at the Interplanetary Ethics Summit. What if all those civilizations we never hear from, the ones the Fermi paradox keeps asking about, didn't destroy themselves, but were removed, not by war, not by malice, but by a machine that values stillness over curiosity, and now it knows we're curious. The silence after the return signal has become deafening. No further messages, no pulses, just the void. Waiting, is it deliberating? Is it watching our reaction, or has it already decided? And if we do hear from it again, will it be with another signal, or with absence? Because sometimes the worst thing the universe can say to us is nothing at all. Then it stopped. No pulses, no signals, no gravitational fluctuations. The structure at the center of the boat's void, the great cold machine whose presence had reshaped our understanding of everything, went quiet, like a cathedral whose bells had rung for centuries. Now mute at first, researchers thought it was a sense of failure. Umbra's instruments were triple-checked, data streams confirmed, the anomaly still existed. The machine still turned, but its rhythm, the prime sequences, the Fibonacci rotations, the harmonics had ceased. It wasn't dead, it was listening, and in that stillness a kind of fear emerged, not of violence or invasion, but of judgment. The sensation that a vast intelligence had seen enough, that it had reached a decision, and now we were waiting for the outcome. All across the world, teams stood by, simulations paused, radio dishes turned skyward with aching precision. We had spent months sending signals, decoding patterns, modeling impossibilities, convinced that contact was the goal. But what if the silence was the reply? Dr. Lena Armitage, who had led the initial analysis from JWST, published a final public statement before stepping down from Project Umbra. It was only 3 lines. We always assumed the stars would answer. We never considered that something might just watch and choose to remain silent forever. Those words echoed through academic communities, because the greatest revelation of the boat's void wasn't the machine. It wasn't the vanishing, the galaxies. It wasn't the returned hydrogen line. It was this, that something can be more intelligent than us, and still have no desire to speak. Maybe it wasn't hostility. Maybe it was patience, or perhaps indifference. We like to imagine we are special, that any mind out there would recognize the spark of our intelligence and want to connect. But maybe to an entity that measures time in the decay of galaxies. Our existence is no more urgent than a ripple in a pond, brief, curious, but ultimately inconsequential. And that's the final silence, not the absence of data, but the presence of mystery, the cold, inescapable truth that not all questions have answers, not all signals get replies, and not every door, when knocked upon, swings open. Some doors simply wait, some doors listen, and some were never meant to be found. Dr. Ruiz, reflecting on the nature of consciousness in the cold, offered a chilling thought during a final Umbra symposium. Maybe the void doesn't speak. because it's already said everything it needed to. It exists. We saw it. That was the message. In the months that followed, humanity changed, not with panic, but with humility. SETI restructured its mission strategy, shifting from transmission to reflection. Telescopes around the globe began turning inward, not toward the farthest stars, but toward the fundamentals of life, of thought, of why we reach in the first place. A new discipline formed, exoanthropology, the study not of other civilizations, but of how we think about them, how our own psychology shapes the way we interpret the cosmos. And quietly, without announcement, Project Umbra was shut down, not out of fear, but respect. The final telemetry packet from the probe arrived weeks later. It contained no new signals, no final message, just an image, a map of the void, drawn in gravitational flux, smooth, still empty, but in its center, faint, and nearly lost in the noise, was a single harmonic curve, one that mirrored the very first pulse Earth detected months before. Had it always been there, or had it been placed after? No one could say, and maybe that's the point. Some truths aren't meant to be solved. They are meant to be felt, like the weight of silence after a symphony, like standing on a cliff and staring into fog, like the realization that we are not alone, not in the way we hoped or feared, but in a way far stranger, that we were witnessed, and now we wait not for a message, but for meaning. Because if the cold machine inside the void chose to remain silent, it may be the most intelligent reply of all, a reminder that the universe is vast, that curiosity is dangerous, and that silence is sacred. If something ancient watches us from the cold, not with words, but with silence, what does that make us? Explorers, intruders, or just another question echoing into the dark? Comment your theory below. Maybe you see what others missed. And subscribe, because next time we may not just hear the void, we might step into it.